Okay, so hi everyone. This is Let's Discuss a Paper soon after reading it. And this is the first journal club this year, 2023. Today we have two participants. Chance Chen, can you introduce yourself?
Oh, okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Qianchen Liang, and I am currently a PhD student at the Tsuchiya Lab, Monash University, Australia.
Okay, thank you. And I'm Yota Kawashima. I'm doing research assistant in Japan. And in this journal club, we picked up paper and read the paper for 2 hours. And from now on, we are going to discuss the paper. And then today's paper, the title, Prestimulus oscillatory brain activity interacts with evoked recurrent processing to facilitate conscious visual perception, written by, the Krasic et al. From Scientific Report 2020. So before starting the discussion, first I will give just a quick summary of this paper. So basically, as the title says, this investigate relationship between prestimulus duration and recurrent processing for conscious visual perception. So recurrent processing is one of well-known theories of consciousness, basically saying that for conscious visual perception, we need two different types of processing. The first is the so-called sweep, first sweep feed forward, just from the low level visual area to higher level visual area. And for conscious perception, it's also important to have a feedback from the higher area to lower area. And this is basically what recurrent processing is saying. And also, other studies suggest that pre-stimulus, specifically alpha activity, seems to facilitate conscious perception. So in a sense, the brain needs to prepare themselves for conscious perceptions. And some studies says that alpha activity, the power and the phase is important for conscious perceptions. So this study basically asking, okay, then how this prestimulus alpha activity is related to recurrent processing. So first, whether it's important or not, and if it's important, then how this prestimulus alpha activity interact with recurrent processing for conscious perception. And this is basically what this paper asking. And to investigate that, we need to see what happened in prestimulus alpha activity when the proper recurrent processing occur and the recurrent processing is disturbed. So we need two conditions, the proper recurrent processing versus disturbed recurrent processing. And in order to have the second condition, disturbed condition, they use the masking technique called object substitution masking. I will not explain the detail of this task, but this basically is thought to disturb the feedback activities. So the feed forward will be intact, but when the masking occurs, the feedback is disturbed. So in this task or in this objective substitution masking, by comparing perceived versus not perceived condition, we can have proper recurrent processing versus improper or disturbed feedback recurrent processing conditions. So in this paper, they use this object substitution masking and then see what happened when participant perceived or not perceived. And they again want to know the relationship between prestimulus alpha activity and recurrent processings. So they checked these two brain activity component in this object substitution masking. And basically, what they found in this paper is that the prestimulus activity seems to relate to recurrent processing, and specifically they said that pre-stimulus strong alpha activity at the specific phase leads to greater visual awareness negativity. This is thought to be response to the feedback from the higher area region. And also this strong alpha activity at the specific phase seems to be related to perception. That, that is kind of necessary for conscious perception. And that is the summary of this paper, just a quick summary. And I didn't explain the detailed task and also how they analyze data. So if you have any question, Chanshin, you can ask now.
Yeah, thanks for the summary. First of all, I don't actually have anything to add on to it. And I also agree that it wouldn't be beneficial to go into details about their data analysis because it's rather complex and all the results and stuff. But I also don't have clarification questions. Okay. But I do have one comment that a thought I have for their overall finding. So the overall finding is when there are higher alpha power, which correspond to synchronized activity of the brain, at the specific, you will observe this stronger negativity at the specific phase, which correspond to better conscious perception. Whereas when the brain is at lower alpha power, which correspond to desynchronized activity, then you will not observe the phase recurrent processing conscious perception kind of link. So what I'm interested in is if synchronized activity is the key to observe these relationships, then would it mean that we can observe a similar relationship during, let's say, sleep or local sleep stages, local sleep states such as mind blanking or mind wandering?
I see. Okay. First of all, they did this experiment with EEG, so it's impossible to talk about the precise brain regions like fMRI. And also they showed just a topography of this brain activity. So they did not do any analysis how each brain area interact with each other or synchronized. And I agree that they mentioned about the alpha activity is related to synchronized in the discussion and also in the intro, but they did not do any analysis. So I don't know. We need to do further analysis to see whether or what kind of synchronization is important. And by doing that, maybe we can see some differences between sleep versus awake, conscious perception. Yeah, but that's just my, comments and thought.
Yeah, Thomas has a paper about how people in sleep can still track conversations.
Mm-mm.
Hmm.
Mm.
Yeah, maybe it's interesting to look into this
Yeah.
in that condition. Yeah.
Mm-mm. Yeah, so I think they explain and how this or the in the discussion they explained the brain area and the synchronization, how they are important for conscious perception and the specific region, I think posterior regions and some parietal region interaction may be important for consciousness, something like that. But I just didn't have time to, read the detail of that part. So I just, skimmed through it. Yeah.
I think they look at how with the negativity
Mm,
during the negativity time window, it first goes negative and then positive, right?
yeah.
And they investigate which region went negative, followed by which other regions went positive, or something like that. But it was a bit complex, so
Yeah. Mm. So yeah, it's a little bit complex. Yeah, but anyway, do you have any comments or questions?
um, I
Um, if no, I have one.
yeah,
Anyway,
yeah. Go ahead.
so yeah, I think in order to see the relation between this Prestimulus alpha oscillation and recurrent processing, we can do like the way how they did. Like first we have two conditions, the proper recurrent processing versus disturbed recurrent processing, and see whether there are any differences between, differences in pre-stimulus activity. But more intuitive ways that as the pre-stimulus activities precede the recurrent processing, what we need to do is the disturb stimulus activity and then what happened in the recurrent processing. So in this paper, they observed that, in this case, we have better, not better, but proper perception and greater visual awareness negativity. So by having, or inducing that specific pre-stimulus alpha activity, then we can see whether that uh, facilitate the proper recurrent processing or not. And that will be the next step, I think.
So okay, let me try to rephrase
Yeah.
what you said just now. So firstly, you mentioned if we want to look at whether pre-stimulus alpha activity interacts with recurrent processing to facilitate conscious perception, instead of disturbing recurrent processing, we can perturb pre-stimulus activities itself and to see whether recurrent processing is just gone.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, the reason is again, pre-stimulus activities precede the following recurrent processing. So it's for me, it's more natural to, disturb the first component and see what happened next. But I understand that, in the first place, we do not know any relationship between pre-stimulus activity and recurrent processing. So
Yeah. The
what
question
kind of,
is,
yeah, what kind of pre-stimulus we need to have is unclear. So first we need to do this kind of, research. And after that, based on this, knowledge, we can, next ask that, okay, we want to have this, pre-stimulus alpha activity. And then if this is true, then we should able to see, or we can make a prediction on DN and perceptions. That's what I want to say. Yeah.
for example, you can use TMS
Mm,
to
yeah.
disrupt its phase. Is it possible to do?
I don't know. I don't know about
But, yeah, like because they're interested in two things about the prestimulus activity, right? It's not just about presence or absence. It's they're interested in both power and phase and the interaction and the independent effects.
Yeah.
So if you were to do this kind of disruption, you have to disrupt each component separately.
Yeah.
And
it's not easy. I understand that.
Yeah. And also if there is no incoming signal, right? There shouldn't be feedback. So you can't just like let's not have any signal.
Okay. Yeah. I see. Yeah, and maybe another thing is that in their result they says that there are no direct effect of prestimulus alpha activity on perceptions. So first of all, their conclusion is that if we want to see whether participants have conscious perception or not, we need to first check the amplitude of VN. It's not easy to see whether participants have conscious perception or not based on prestimulus alpha activity. Of course, other studies in this paper, they mentioned that other studies suggest that it's possible to predict conscious perception based on prestimulus activity, but in this paper or in their data, they just couldn't do that. So the VN is the most key factor. And then that VAN is somehow related to this prestimulus alpha activity and then some complicated interactions between alpha activity, power, and phase. And we can then say that maybe this alpha activity and this specific phase is important for conscious perception or something like that.
So they never directly influence perception, but they are more like they have their impact through VAN itself.
Yeah.
So it seems that the most prominent kind of should I say neural correlate? It seems too big, but the most in this context, the more prominent marker of perception is VAN itself rather than any prestimulus alpha power or phase kind of. Yeah.
Yeah.
And also they mentioned this the effect of phase on VAN influence the temporal selection of targets. So if the stimulus occur at an optimal phase, it will regulate VAN. It would correspond to a stronger VAN. And they keep on mentioning about this temporal selection, which I do not fully understand.
Temporal selection, me neither.
Okay.
Temporal selection. I guess the previous paper, I think from the same lab, they talk about that because they use basically the same, paradigm. This forgot the name, object substitution masking, and then investigate what they can see in ELP, like DN, visual awareness negativity, and other EEG component, instead of investigating the prestimulus component. Temporal selectivity is, I think, I don't know, but may related to some brain activity, EEG component, like, I don't know, maybe P1 component in EEG. I'm not sure, but at least they mentioned something about P1 and selectivity stuff in the introduction. So maybe some relationship. Temporal selectivity. I don't know. I can just Google it now.
Wait, coming back to its introduction, it may mean the, how do I say this? The selection of what kind of visual information to prioritize for processing, because the whole this object substitution masking shenanigan is about after you present the cue, right? You still have the signal for the masks prolonged on the screen, and that makes the brain kind of select the signal for the mask rather than the cue itself for processing, so that you do not have feed-forward processing for the cue itself, right? So that's like temporally, it's about selecting which signal from which stimulus coming from different time scales. So they call that temporal selection.
Okay. Yeah, that makes
maybe.
Sense. Yeah, my explanation will be long then. Yeah. Okay, anyway. Prestimulus activity. I forgot the title of the paper, but I know that some people says that we can detect or predict the perception, or at least predict the participant response based on prestimulus activity.
Yeah, I remember. I think there's I saw a paper about prestimulus activity and confidence. I think I need to check. Let me check that.
Yeah, so in that sense, yeah, this
paper
somehow inconsistent, but the discussion, they said that, but still consistent with these results to some extent. So I need to read this paper more detail to understand. Visual awareness negativity. Yeah. I think I could understand their main, claim, what they want to say this paper, but some, data analysis part is not easy for me to understand. Like, for example, they mentioned about the phase, preferred phase.
Yes, that.
I don't know what does it mean. So I just skimmed through the method part, and it seems like they just compute the phase of alpha activity. Yeah. For each conditions, like perceived versus not perceived.
So I in the intro, when they talk about this phase effect of alpha power, they are talking about if the stimulus is presented at an optimal phase, then they will have a better perception. So at that point, I understand their and then they mentioned preferred phase for something, and then I thought preferred phase means the optimal phase for presenting a stimulus if you want it to be visible. But in their analysis, it seems that they were just averaging the phase for perceived trials and not perceived trials and compare whether the phases are different. And if they're different, then they call the average phase for perceived trials are the optimal phase. And then the non-perceived trials are the non-optimal ones, or like the anti-optimal, like the worst phase or something like that.
Yeah. So, and also in the figure 2, they show the result, the phase result for each participant. And then if the preferred phase are clustered or are cross participant, then maybe it's easy to understand. But
they are like all scattered around, like all 200, like 360 degrees. So I guess that's...
And also from this figure too, we can't pair the perceived versus not perceived for each participant. So it's not easy to see because, for example, like if the perceived versus not perceived conditions, the preferred or just the phase is completely opposite for each participant, then maybe we can say that it's completely opposite. But from this figure, we can't see something like that. So I don't know how we can interpret this.
Yeah, right. So, well, the counter argument would be like, I mean, the blue ones are mostly on the top, and then the red ones are mostly at the bottom. So Q perceived ones are mostly around below 180, and then the not perceived trials are the phase are mostly on the above 180. So there got to be a large number of participants who have opposite phases. But then I think your claim is valid, especially when they have the sample size is 29 people.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have a few. You also have a few like overlapping thoughts for the like overlapping prefer phase for Q perceived and not perceived primes, which we are not sure whether they come from the same subjects or not.
Yeah. So it's difficult to understand this, phase analysis, the preferred phase.
Well, at least when they average it, it looks they are opposite.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you want to do some modeling, for example, based on this analysis, and we want to decide, specific, phase for perception, not perceived conditions, then the comparing the two conditions, perceived versus not perceived, is not helpful because we can't decide the preferred phases. For example, 60-degree is somehow facilitate or the perception or following processing, because the phase is like this, and then let's say not the 0-degree will be like just the middle of the wave. And this kind of increase, if we want to say that this kind of increase is important for visual processing or the recurrent processing, we need to decide, okay, this 0 degree is important. But if we take the subtract between the two perceived, we can't decide which point is important. What we can say is that they are just different. That's it.
Okay.
Yeah, so I kind of understand why they want to decide the preferred, the specific value, instead of just seeing the differences between two conditions. But yeah, it's difficult to understand.
And also, like in the figure 3A.
3, yeah.
Okay. I don't think this is a question. They are trying to show here that the VAN, the ERP activity for lower power is stronger. Like the waves are more negative for lower power.
Yeah.
What they're trying to say, right? Because
yes.
in the text they said stronger negativity polarity difference. And I didn't understand what polarity means. I thought they mean like polarity. I thought they mean like the difference between the lowest point and the highest point, and it was like trying to use a rule. Because like they look kind of the same if you are talking about the difference between the highest point and the lowest point.
Just more what they want to say. It's just, the negative direction, and that's it.
More negative.
More negative, that's it.
I see. Okay.
Yeah. And another interesting thing is that it's not related to their finding, but they did, some Bayesian analysis, Bayesian mixed modeling, generalized modeling. And I think, I want to understand that part as well.
Yeah. It seems Bayesian analysis is very popular recently. Everyone's doing it.
Yeah.
I feel like in the near future, I will be asked to transit to that too, instead of relying on my favorite LME.
Yeah. In fact, it's difficult to, interpret their results, based on their figure, let's say 4 and 5. They show some result. And I kind of, understand what they try to say, but, that they use the base factor.
So you don't know about the like effect size or like, whether it's very strong effect
Or I just could not, understand how, first of all, how they compute this base factor. And also, this, for example, figure 5, the top right figure, it's showing the more negative VAN predict better awareness. So I expect that, that x-axis is the amplitude of VAN and y-axis is, I guess, the perception, the performance. And then they says that more negative predict better awareness. So more negative VAN, better awareness. So the
x-axis.
Yeah.
The x-axis, the negative is on the right hand, like.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
And I expect that, base factor, some, I don't know, significant base factor above 10 will be shown on that, part where the VAN is most negative and the performance of perception is really high. But they show this, VAN base factor above 10 is around, the mean of amplitude. Because they say more negative VAN amplitude predicted better awareness primarily when amplitude were at the mean. Amplitude were at the mean. I guess this amplitude is VAN amplitude. So it's, I just couldn't understand what this means. Amplitude.
No, wait, it's amplitude. Yeah. So what you're saying is the Bayesian factor should be bigger as the VAN become negativity amplitude is bigger, and then which also corresponds. Basically, the shaded region should be on the right.
Yeah, exactly. That was my, expectation without knowing detail of the base factor analysis. But they show that, only the middle. So I don't know how to interpret this. Yeah, it's difficult. Just difficult for me. And I didn't, read the method part in detail. So I need to read that to understand that part. Okay. Anyway, do you have anything? I don't have anything to add. So if you want to say anything, go ahead. Nothing?
Nothing on my end.
Okay, then shall we finish journal growth?
Yeah.
Okay, then let's finish then. See you next week. Bye bye.